Earth had become a fortress, though not by choice. The once thriving planet now bristled with weapons, turrets, orbital defense platforms, and hastily constructed bunkers. Cities were fortified, and civilians trained in basic combat skills, knowing that every hand might be needed when the time came. Yet, despite these preparations, fear lingered like a shadow over humanity's last refuge. The void was coming, and no one knew if Earth's defenses would hold. General William Hayes stood on the command deck of the UEDC headquarters, staring at a holographic map of the solar system. Red markers blinked ominously, showing the estimated trajectory of the void's advance. Each day brought them closer, their dark fleet blotting out stars as they moved. Hayes clenched his fists, feeling the weight of leadership pressing down on him. He wasn't just responsible for soldiers, he carried the hopes of billions. Failure meant extinction. "Sir," an officer interrupted, handing him a report. "The latest intel confirms. They're accelerating." Hayes nodded grimly. Time was slipping away faster than anyone expected. He turned to face the room full of strategists and scientists gathered around the table. Among them was Laura Harper, who had been granted clearance to assist in decoding the alien signals. Her work had gained attention after she identified patterns within the transmission's patterns. That hinted at something more than random destruction. "We need answers," Hayes said bluntly. "If we don't figure out what we're dealing with soon, all this preparation will mean nothing." Laura glanced up from her notes, her expression determined but weary. She hadn't slept much since Jack left for training. Nights were spent poring over data, searching for anything that could give humanity an edge. The signals were maddeningly complex, but she believed there was meaning hidden within them, something important, something vital. Back at the training camp, Jack struggled to adjust to his new reality. Surrounded by strangers, he felt out of place. Most of the recruits were younger, eager to prove themselves in battle. Jack, however, couldn't shake the image of his family back home. Every drill, every lesson reminded him of what he stood to lose. Still, he pushed forward, driven by a quiet resolve. If he had to fight, he'd do it well. He formed bonds with a few others during those weeks. Daniel Carter, a farmer-turned-soldier, shared stories of his childhood on Mars. Samantha Brooks, a sharp-witted medic, kept morale high with her dry humor. Together, they became a small support network, helping each other through the grueling regimen. Meanwhile, Laura made a breakthrough. Late one night, buried deep in lines of code, she uncovered fragments of language embedded within the void's signals. It wasn't random noise, it was communication. Fragments of coordinates, warnings, even references to a weapon. A weapon, powerful enough to challenge the void itself. Excited, but cautious, Laura rushed to share her findings with Dr. Rachel Morgan, a linguist assigned to the project. Rachel's expertise helped piece together more of the puzzle. What emerged was both thrilling and terrifying. The weapon existed, but it was buried beneath Earth's surface, hidden in ruins older than recorded history. "This changes everything," Rachel murmured, staring at the decoded message. "If we can find it." "But will we have time?" Laura asked softly. Both women knew the answer was uncertain. Word of the discovery reached General Hayes quickly. Though skeptical, he authorized a mission to investigate. A team would be sent into the ruins to locate the weapon. Laura volunteered immediately, unwilling to let her work end here. Hayes hesitated before agreeing, knowing her knowledge would be invaluable, but also aware of the risks involved. When Jack received orders assigning him to the mission, his stomach churned. He hadn't expected to see Laura again so soon, under such circumstances. As the team assembled, led by Captain Alex Rivera, Jack found himself torn between dread and determination. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about hope, about proving that humanity wouldn't go quietly into the void. As the team prepared to leave, Laura pulled Jack aside. "Promise me you'll come back," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll try," Jack replied, holding her gaze. But inside, he wondered if promises mattered when facing the end of the world. In a distant corner of the galaxy, humanity had once dreamed of endless possibilities. For centuries, people traveled between stars, building homes on faraway planets and trading with alien civilizations. Life felt limitless, as if nothing could ever stop the march of progress. But dreams can shatter quickly when faced with something beyond understanding. It started with whispers, strange reports trickling in from the edges of explored space. Entire colonies had gone silent without warning. Ships sent to investigate vanished without a trace. At first, many dismissed these incidents as accidents or natural disasters. But then came the images: barren planets where lush forests once thrived, empty cities reduced to ash. Whatever was causing this destruction left no survivors behind. The name the void began to spread among frightened settlers. No one knew what it truly was. Some said it was a weapon created by an ancient civilization. Others believed it was a force of nature, like a storm that consumed everything in its path. What everyone agreed on, however, was that it was unstoppable. One by one, neighboring alien species either fled their territories or went extinct. Humanity found itself alone in a suddenly hostile galaxy. Back on Earth, panic set in as news of the devastation reached home. In New York City, Jack Harper sat at his kitchen table, staring blankly at the morning headlines. His wife Laura stood nearby, brewing coffee while trying not to let her hands shake. They were ordinary people caught up in extraordinary times. Jack worked as an engineer, designing tools for mining operations on distant moons. Laura spent her days analyzing data at a research facility, searching for patterns in cosmic phenomena. Neither of them imagined their lives would change so drastically. "What do you think it is?" Jack asked, finally, breaking the silence. Laura hesitated before answering. "I don't know. Something unnatural. It's moving too fast, too deliberately. This isn't random." Her words hung heavy in the air. Outside their apartment window, the city buzzed with activity, oblivious to the growing threat. People hurried to work, children laughed on sidewalks, and cars honked impatiently in traffic. To most, life carried on as usual, yet beneath the surface, fear simmered. That evening, Laura returned home late, her face pale and drawn. She carried a tablet filled with files she wasn't supposed to bring back. Her supervisor had warned her against sharing the information, but Laura couldn't stay quiet any longer. Sitting beside Jack on the couch, she showed him fragments of intercepted signals. Strange symbols pulsed across the screen, rhythmic and hypnotic. "They're coming," she whispered. "Whoever or whatever they are, they're heading toward us." Jack stared at the glowing display, feeling a chill run down his spine. He wanted to believe it was all a mistake, some glitch in the system, but deep down, he knew better. The evidence was undeniable. Earth and all of humanity was next. Over the following weeks, governments scrambled to prepare for the worst. Emergency broadcasts urged citizens to stockpile supplies. Military bases braced for attack. Scientists worked around the clock to decode the mysterious transmissions Laura had discovered. Meanwhile, Jack watched helplessly as his world unraveled. He hated feeling powerless, unable to protect his family or contribute meaningfully to the fight. Then came the draft notice. When Jack opened the envelope, his heart sank. Like thousands of others, he'd been called to serve in the United Earth Defense Coalition, UEDC. Leaving Laura and their 2 kids behind felt unbearable, but there was no choice. Everyone had to play their part if humanity hoped to survive. As he packed his belongings, Laura hugged him tightly. "You'll come back," she said firmly, though tears glistened in her eyes. "We need you here." Jack nodded, forcing a smile. Inside, though, doubt gnawed at him. Would he really return? Or would he become another casualty in a war humanity seemed destined to lose? Little did he know, the answers lay hidden in those cryptic signals Laura had uncovered. Somewhere within them was a glimmer of hope, a chance to fight back against the darkness swallowing the stars. But finding it would require courage, sacrifice, and a willingness to face the unknown. And time was running out. The journey to the ruins began under a cloud of uncertainty. The team traveled in a heavily armored transport, its engines humming as it cut through dense forests and rocky terrain. Captain Alex Rivera sat at the front, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. Behind him, Jack Harper adjusted his gear, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in his chest. Laura sat nearby, clutching a tablet filled with the decoded messages she had worked so hard to decipher. She kept glancing at Jack, her worry evident but unspoken. The destination was an ancient site buried deep beneath the Earth's crust, hidden for millennia, according to the signals. It was built by a long-extinct civilization of people who had once faced the void and paid a terrible price. No one knew what they would find there, but the stakes were too high to turn back now. If the weapon existed, it might be humanity's only chance to survive. As the transport descended into a canyon, the air grew colder and the landscape became more desolate. The team disembarked near the entrance to the ruins, a jagged opening carved into the side of a mountain. Vines snaked across the stone walls, and faint carvings hinted at the structure's age. It was both awe-inspiring and unnerving, a relic of a forgotten time. "Stay alert," Rivera ordered, his voice steady but firm. "We don't know what's waiting for us down there." Jack nodded, gripping his rifle tightly. Beside him, Samantha Brooks checked her medical kit, while Daniel Carter adjusted the settings on his scanner. Emma Taylor, another soldier assigned to the mission, took point, her movements cautious but efficient. The group moved as one, their footsteps echoing softly in the narrow passageway. Inside, the air was damp and heavy, carrying the faint scent of earth and decay. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly in hues of blue and green. Laura stopped occasionally to examine them, comparing them to the data on her tablet. "These match the patterns we found," she whispered, excitement edging her voice. "We're on the right path." But the deeper they went, the more ominous the atmosphere became. The passageways twisted and turned unpredictably, as if designed to confuse intruders. Traps lay dormant in some areas, pressure plates, collapsing floors, and dart-launching mechanisms triggered by careless steps. Ryan Mitchell, the team's tech expert, disarmed several of these devices, his hands steady despite the tension. At one point, the group entered a large chamber filled with towering statues. Each figure depicted a humanoid being, their faces contorted in expressions of anguish or defiance. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, atop which rested a crystal-like object pulsating with light. Laura approached it cautiously, her heart racing. "This could be part of the weapon," she said, her voice barely audible over the hum emanating from the artifact. Before anyone could respond, the ground trembled violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling as sections of the wall shifted, revealing concealed entrances. From these openings emerged shadowy figures, automated guardians left behind by the ancient civilization. Their metallic forms gleamed menacingly as they advanced, weapons raised. "Take cover," Rivera shouted, diving behind a pillar. The team scrambled for safety, returning fire as the guardians unleashed beams of energy. The battle was chaotic, the confined space making it difficult to maneuver. Jack fired repeatedly, his shots striking true but doing little to slow the relentless machines. Laura crouched low, shielding herself from the chaos. Her mind raced. These guardians weren't just obstacles, they were tests. The ancients hadn't made this easy. Whoever sought the weapon had to prove themselves worthy. "We need to destroy the crystal," she yelled, pointing to the pedestal. "It's powering them." Emma nodded, tossing a grenade toward the crystal. The explosion shattered the artifact, and the guardians froze mid-motion before collapsing into lifeless heaps. For a moment, silence reigned. That was too close, Daniel muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Rivera stepped forward, his expression grim. Let's keep moving, we're not done yet. As they pressed onward, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest challenges still lay ahead. The ruins seemed alive, watching their every move, and somewhere within its depths, the weapon waited both a promise and a peril. Jack sat on the cold stone floor of the chamber, his head bowed as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. The weapon, or whatever it was, now lived inside him, its presence humming faintly beneath his skin like a second heartbeat. It wasn't painful anymore, but it was overwhelming. Memories that weren't his own flickered in his mind, battles fought long ago, worlds turned to ash, and faces twisted with despair. The ancient civilization that created the weapon had paid a terrible price for wielding it. And now, Jack wondered if he would share their fate. Laura knelt beside him, her hands gripping his shoulders. "Are you all right?" she asked again, her voice trembling. She didn't understand what had changed, but she could see it in his eyes. They were different, glowing faintly with an inner light. "I'm still here," Jack replied, though the words felt hollow. He clenched his fists, feeling the power coursing through him. It was intoxicating, but also terrifying. What if he lost control? What if the weapon consumed him, just as it had consumed its creators? Captain Rivera approached cautiously, his weapon drawn but lowered. "We need answers," he said firmly. "What did it do to you?" Before Jack could respond, the chamber began to shift again. The holograms reappeared, this time showing detailed scenes of how the weapon worked. The ancients hadn't just built it, they had bonded with it, merging their consciousness with its vast intelligence. It gave them unimaginable strength, allowing them to fight back against the void, but the cost was high. Over time, the weapon's sentience grew dominant, erasing the individuality of those who wielded it. In the end, even victory came at the price of their humanity. "This thing, it's alive," Jack murmured, staring at his hands. "It's not just a tool. It's part of me now." The team exchanged uneasy glances. They had hoped for a straightforward solution, a weapon they could use, but this was far more complicated. If Jack couldn't control it, the consequences could be catastrophic. Rachel Morgan, the linguist, stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "We can't turn back now," she said. "If the void reaches Earth, none of us will survive. This might be our only chance." Her words hung heavy in the air. Everyone knew she was right. The void was relentless, consuming everything in its path. Humanity's options were dwindling, and fear was spreading across the planet like wildfire. Jack understood the stakes better than anyone. He had volunteered for this mission knowing it might cost him everything. Now, he had no choice but to see it through. "We need to learn how to use it," Laura said, breaking the silence. Her tone was calm but urgent. "There has to be a way to control it without losing yourself." Jack nodded slowly, focusing inward. He could feel the weapon's presence in his mind, a vast and alien intelligence waiting to be accessed. Tentatively, he reached out to it, probing its boundaries. At first, there was resistance, as if testing his resolve. Then, images flooded his thoughts, maps of the galaxy, schematics of the void's ships, strategies for combat. It was offering knowledge, but it demanded trust in return. "Listen to me," Jack said aloud, addressing the others. "This thing knows things we don't. It can help us fight, but I have to stay in control. If I don't..." He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Rivera placed a hand on his shoulder. "You won't face this alone. We're with you." The reassurance meant more than Jack could express. For all the power surging within him, he felt painfully vulnerable. The burden of responsibility weighed heavily, but knowing he wasn't alone made it bearable. As the team prepared to leave the chamber, Jack took one last look at the glowing carvings on the walls. The ancients' warning echoed in his mind. Only the willing may survive. He didn't know if he was truly willing, not yet, but he couldn't afford to doubt himself now. Earth needed him. Humanity needed him. When they emerged from the ruins, the sky above was darkening, streaked with red clouds that signaled the approach of the void. Its shadow loomed closer than ever, a reminder of the battle ahead. Jack stood tall, despite the turmoil inside him. He didn't feel like a hero, but he knew what he had to do. The journey back to the surface was quiet, each member of the team lost in their own thoughts. As they boarded the transport, Jack glanced at Laura, who gave him a small, encouraging smile. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. For the first time since the void appeared, humanity had a plan and a fighter willing to stand against the darkness. But whether Jack could master the weapon before it mastered him remained to be seen. The deeper the team ventured into the ruins, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air felt heavier, almost suffocating, and an eerie silence enveloped them after the battle with the Guardians. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive, and the glowing symbols now shifted subtly, like they were watching. Each step forward felt like walking into the unknown, but turning back wasn't an option. Humanity's survival depended on what lay ahead. Laura led the way, her tablet guiding them through the labyrinth. She paused at every intersection, cross-referencing the map generated from the decoded signals. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. This place was unlike anything she had ever encountered, and the weight of responsibility pressed down on her. If she made a wrong decision, it could cost everyone their lives. Jack walked close behind her, his rifle at the ready. He kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting another ambush. The encounter with the Guardians had left him shaken. They weren't just machines, they were designed to test intruders, to ensure only the worthy reached their goal. What other challenges awaited them? And what exactly did worthy mean to the ancients who built this place? After navigating a series of twisting corridors, the team arrived at a massive door, sealed with intricate carvings. Unlike the others, these symbols didn't glow, they seemed dormant, waiting. Laura examined them carefully, tracing the patterns with her fingers. "This is it," she said softly. "The entrance to the chamber where the weapon is kept." "How do we open it?" Rivera asked, his voice low but commanding. Laura hesitated. I think it responds to intent, to purpose. We need to show it why we're here." The group exchanged uneasy glances. None of them fully understood what that meant, but time was running out. The Void's forces were closing in on Earth, and every second mattered. Laura stepped forward, placing her hand against the cold stone. Closing her eyes, she focused on her thoughts, on the billions of lives depending on them, on her family, on Jack. Slowly, the carvings began to light up, spreading warmth across the surface of the door. With a deep rumble, it slid open. Inside was a vast chamber bathed in soft, golden light. At its center floated a crystalline structure, suspended in midair and radiating energy. It was beautiful, yet intimidating, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. Surrounding it were holographic projections, images of the ancient civilization that had created it. The people in the recordings looked human-like, their faces etched with determination and sorrow. They spoke in a language no one understood, but the tone was clear. "Warning, this is it," Laura whispered, awestruck. "The weapon." Rivera scanned the room cautiously. "Looks too easy. Where's the catch?" As if answering his question, the chamber began to change. The floor beneath them shifted, forming a circular platform surrounded by empty space. From the walls emerged more holograms, showing scenes of destruction, the void consuming planets, civilizations crumbling. Then came images of the weapon being used, obliterating the invaders but leaving devastation in its wake. Finally, there was a message, repeated over and over. Asterisk, only the chosen may wield it. Only the willing may survive. Asterisk, what does that mean? Samantha asked nervously. Before anyone could answer, the crystal descended, hovering inches above the ground. A voice echoed through the chamber, not spoken aloud, but resonating directly in their minds. Asterisk, asterisk, who will bear the burden? Asterisk, asterisk, the team froze. No one moved. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. Whoever stepped forward would take on something far greater than themselves. Something dangerous and unpredictable. Jack felt a surge of emotion. He thought of Laura, of his children, of all the people counting on them. He couldn't let fear hold him back. Taking a deep breath, he stepped onto the platform. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady, despite the storm inside him. The crystal pulsed brighter, focusing its energy on him. The others watched anxiously as tendrils of light wrapped around Jack, lifting him off the ground. Pain shot through his body, but he gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out. Images flooded his mind, visions of the ancient creators, their triumphs, their failures, their ultimate sacrifice. He saw the weapon not as a tool, but as a living entity, bound to its user. When the light faded, Jack collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. The crystal was gone, absorbed into him. He felt different, stronger, yet burdened by something he couldn't fully comprehend. "You okay?" Laura asked, rushing to his side. "I don't know," Jack replied honestly. But one thing was certain. Humanity now had a fighting chance. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen.